This is Chuck Kowalski with Commodities Street Journal. Hi, this is Chuck Kowalski with Commodities Street Journal. Today is Monday, February 4th. In this segment, I want to talk about the longer-term perspective on sugar. We've seen prices bounce back and forth for the last couple weeks, but overall, I think we might have seen a long-term bottom around the 18-cent level. If you look at the near-term fundamentals, supplies are somewhat high right now. Brazil is producing a large crop this year, which is helping rebuild some of the global stockpiles. But if you look at the longer-term perspective, we're starting to see a pretty major shift coming out of Brazil with some of their policies as well as some of our policies, in addition to worldwide demand increasing over the long term. So if we concentrate on Brazil, first of all, they did two things that were pretty significant. First thing was they increased their ethanol usage in gasoline from 20% to 25%, which is very significant. That's going to help increase the demand for sugar-based ethanol over there and, of course, the demand for sugar in whole. The second thing they did is they raised the price of their gasoline, which ethanol, sugar-based supply for fuel is competitive with gasoline. So if they increase the price of gasoline, that makes ethanol-based fuel cheaper. So more demand will come from the end users using sugar-based ethanol as opposed to gasoline. So that's really going to help increase the long-term demand for sugar as a whole. And if we look over to the United States, we have the RFS mandates from the government, which mandates that we use ethanol in our gasoline, and that can be derived right now from corn-based ethanol, but there's an advanced biofuels component of that, which is sugar-based ethanol, and we get that from Brazil. So that's really going to help increase over the period of the next 10 years. It's going up substantially the amount of allocation that they're having from corn-based ethanol to sugar-based ethanol, which is really going to increase the demand for sugar-based ethanol if we are allowed to do that going forward, but it looks like we are. So the long-term perspective is demand is going to increase substantially just from the fuel-based ethanol coming out of sugar. And if we look at the other factor, which is consumption of sugar as a food ingredient, demand from China is going to be very high going forward over the next 10 years, as well as some of the other developing countries, as well as our country too. Demand pretty much moves up at a pretty steady pace. So we have twofold, the ethanol, and we have food ingredient, which is really very solid component for demand going forward. So the onus is really on the production side, and these countries have to keep up with production going forward. And we've seen over history that that's very difficult. A lot of sugar is grown in tropical climates where they're subjected to adverse weather. So eventually we're going to run into those, every other year or every third year maybe, which is going to cut back on the production of sugar. So pretty much the demand-supply equation says that we're going forward with higher prices over the long term. Prices in the short term can bounce around anywhere, but I think the long-term picture is sugar should be one of the best commodities over the next 10 years, pretty much because demand is going to be very solid across the board for sugar, and it's unlikely that production is going to be able to keep up with it over that span of 10 years or so. So keep an eye on that with a long-term perspective. That might be one of those commodities to buy and hold for a long period of time. So take a look at the charts, look at the fundamentals a little bit better, make your own evaluation, and I'll keep you updated on the markets. This is Chuck Kowalski with Commodities Street Journal.